First of all, I'll start the recording. I will share the screen with the computer audio. Well, I'm really privileged to have the maestro that is Dudley Bright tonight. Someone who I've admired for a very long time and had the pleasure of sharing worship at Regent Hall. And looking at the list of music, I was surprised by how many pieces I had in my collection. So it's a real treat to be with someone who I thoroughly... I actually remember actually playing any of it, but I think I enjoy listening more than playing. But Dudley, hello, good evening. Welcome to the club. How are you?
Nice to be here. It's a privilege is all mine.
Well, I think some of the responses I've had, it's been more enjoyable than I could possibly have anticipated. But we're just going to have a bit of a waffle, talk about compositions and the Bright musical history, and we'll go from there. But I know you're a trombonist, you've got professional capabilities, but I'd like to know, where did it all start from you from a writing music point of view, that outside of your own family and on the stands of the local Salvation Army band were the first to hear this piece of composition that you'd put together, and you were brave enough that other people wanted to play it? When did that first happen?
I don't really know. I remember my father bringing sort of scrap paper home from work and me drawing 5 lines on it. As far as I can remember, I've always wanted to write something down. But as regards getting anything played, I can't remember, I think a Boscombe band came to Wealdstone with Ken Downey was bandmaster, and they played my first march, which wasn't very good, but I thought that was a tremendous encouragement from someone like him.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Obviously, you've, as you say, composing from an early age before you started being published, and looking on the music index, your first thing was Rise Up, O Youth, a March 1972. Fortunately, I couldn't trace a recording of it. I think the first march I can trace is Spirit of the West, which is 1983.
Oh, it's a lot further on, yeah.
Yeah, which I think was written for a music camp in America, if I remember my sleeve notes. But, so what was it like, when you first sort of got your music on the stands of the local Salvation Army band and they wanted to play it, and you were still a player and enjoying it? What was that experience like? Can you remember?
I never had that experience. I don't think we ever did play anything of mine.
Ooh, so who was the first band to play a bit of Dudley Bright Salvation Army music then? Or music destined for the religious music?
I don't know. It was probably the staff band when I sent something in.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Normally the local YP band gets inflicted. I've done this quintet for Mum and Dad. Would you like to have a look at it? So you obviously you've developed into a professional composer and player with the various orchestras and stuff, as well as your trombone playing and your instrument playing with the Salvation Army band. So was that something that you started out to do, to become the professional musician rather than, I know, a bricklayer or the local postman? Was the professional musician always on the cards?
Very much not. No, the local army people said, "Oh, you don't want to be a musician. It's very insecure. You have to hang around pubs to get work." Well, I've never hung around pubs to get work, and I've never been without work until now.
Oh.
But the idea was that I would. I couldn't do anything but music, so I was going to be a teacher, and I went to college to learn the trombone, and I just sort of fell into orchestral playing, and there it was facing me, so I went along with it.
Obviously there's a different kind of, I would guess, a dramatic learning in the sense of in an orchestra as opposed to playing the trombone in an army band. The discipline is slightly different. And also in an orchestra, you're playing music that can be chronically different to playing in an army band, whereas most it's religious music or transcription of a famous piece. So how did you learn the discipline between the two?
Well, when I first started out playing in orchestra, the sound was very, very different. At that time, orchestral trombone playing was very warm and big, and the pea shooters of the brass band world were still not far behind. So there was actually a big difference in sound, and obviously I remember going for an audition for the National Youth Orchestra, and I played my bit, and the lady doing the audition said, "You play with vibrato," and I went, "Do I?" And I don't think I knew what she meant. But I said, "Well, I don't think I do it when I play it in the orchestra," and I'd never really thought about it. But those are different. But one of the big differences is that you have to sit around for an awful long time doing nothing in a symphony orchestra. And I always dread friends coming to concerts and seeing me afterwards and saying, "You don't do very much."
Well, you're just playing your part, aren't you? I mean, if you know, I think Stephen Cobb famously said that his father got really annoyed at the lengths that Les Condon put into the present age, because cornets worked, really long intervals that were so unusual. So presumably that training helped when the trombone doesn't become the primary instrument, and you can you're not sitting there trying not to look bored, but to be able to contribute and listen to what the rest of the band are doing because of that formulaic training. Would that be a fair thing to say, or is that total balderdash?
Well, the thing was that once I'd left college and got myself, I was principal trombone in the Halle Orchestra from almost almost as soon as I left college. And
that one was Maisie Wiggins, wasn't it?
I think she was a little bit before me. I
know. I'm not saying you were in there at the same time, but the same orchestra.
In fact, my immediate predecessor was Chris Merritt, who's also has been known to write Salvation Army music in his time.
Yeah.
But I didn't play in an army band, so it's only in recent years since we went to Regent Hall, and I've been able to take part in the corps.
Yeah. So when you were, when you started writing music, I mean, obviously your first piece was published 1972, but obviously there were pieces that were written and completed and then just weren't sent in for years after that, and the order of things written is completely different to the order of things published. So from if you weren't playing in a Salvation Army band when you were being published by the Army, you had The Great Physician, Near the Cross, Brooklands, one of my favourites, Abundant Joy. How did you get the sense of, did you have a brass band that was saying, okay, this is going to be sent into the Salvation Army headquarters? Would you mind having a blow for it so I can hear it? Because obviously the idea in your head is different to hearing the cornets and trombones in real life going, that section at C doesn't sound quite right, Dudley. What were you trying to think of?
Yeah, no, that never really happened to me. I don't know if that is what actually happens to composers, but I certainly lack that kind of encouragement and help. I do have a letter from my very earliest submission from Ray Steven Allen, and it's a piece called "Beautiful Mansions."
Ooh.
And I can date it because I don't know if you've seen the photo that's floating around of me standing in front of the International Staff Band playing a trombone solo. Have you seen that photo?
There's probably a few, but I haven't seen anything recently. So
yeah, that's a very old photo. And on the same letter from him, he congratulated me on my performance on that night, and I was actually 14. So and he actually took the trouble to point out some of the things I needed to do. But once I got something published, that it was either they took it or they didn't, and there's not a lot of rejects, as it were.
Oh, that's interesting. Who were your mentors? When you were developing your musical process, was there anybody that you can think of that would, you'd be brave enough to sit down and say, "Look, I'm working on this piece. Would you mind having a look?"
No, I didn't. No, I'm probably. I mean, I obviously learned at college, and In fact, when I was at school, I had a very good music teacher who was very strict and made you do your 4-part harmony. But we used to. I grew up in the borough of Harrow,
Mhm.
and there was an annual competition, and which used to be very formulaic, and the oldest people got to sort of harmonise a hymn tune or something. But when I got to that age, they changed it to more open categories. And one year I won it playing the trombone, and a kind of prize for that was to play a movement of a concerto with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. But then I'd won that, so the next year I won the competition writing a brass quartet, and that was played by members of the Royal Philharmonic, which was quite scary. Uh,
But very
so
humbling, I would have thought. Yeah.
and I thought, well, this is good. Well, next year I'll write a piece for orchestra, and then I'll have a whole orchestral piece played. And the result was they said, oh, you can't enter it because you've won for 2 years running. And I said, well, so the music advisor, I actually got my tea here. Yeah.
Oh, an army cup of tea.
My wife's best tea. And the music advisor said, well, can I see this piece you've written? And I showed it to him, and he said, well, we'll get the Royal Philharmonic to play it. So they played this piece. I do have a recording of it, actually. It was called Dance for Orchestra. Some of it's a bit childish, but I'm quite proud of it for my age. So yeah, that there was a composing class at the National Youth Orchestra, and I sent in a few pieces for that. But generally, on the army side, I was very much on my own.
Okay. Some corps they have people come in and come through, and some corps it's like, unless I went to London and I went to an event and I had it in, and RSA said, look, I'll be there, bring the score in your backpack kind of thing. You know, you wouldn't be exposed to that, would you?
No, I don't think. I don't know.
It's interesting to see the difference.
I did have a very early trombone solo that I tried at North London Youth Band with Ray Bowes was the conductor. And I remember it for one thing, because afterwards someone came up and said, you think you're so clever. Why do you write sub P? He said, why can't you write double piano like everybody else? And instead of sub P, of course, subito, suddenly, piano. That's why I don't know what happened to that.
Were you familiar with the actual sort of technical concepts when you were composing? Because talking to other composers, they self-taught, they were just doodling around, and then someone said, "You do know that's officially called harmonization?" Is it? I just done it because it came naturally, or was that part of the college training in you?
It wasn't natural at all, but it was very much self-taught and self-found out. But of course, I had the musical training of music college, but I didn't train as a composer. But all the usual influences were there of the army composers, and the top ones. I just wanted to produce stuff like they did. Never quite managed it.
Well, I think there are plenty of excellent pieces in your repertoire that would stand up with the greatest, and I would put them up there with the greatest.
Oh, you're too kind.
Well, no, it's one you get some composers who I've heard of said, well, he's a bit functional. It's kind of automatic pilot for him, and obviously some composers they take deliberately a time and effort to produce some pieces. I mean, I've been really surprised that many composers are not ambitious to say, I'm not bothered about the Royal Albert Hall, but I want the local band to be able to play it because it will be played. The worst thing of having a piece of music is it's sitting on the shelf. So I want to write it for people to use. So
yeah.
You find yourself as a functional composer?
No, I'm the other way round. I think I aimed for the Albert Hall.
Yes, I've been there when you've done it. In fact, I just come back to me. My very first, I saw Julian in the corridor, and I said, "Where's your brother?" And he said, "Oh, he's around the corner." And he said, "Go on, Marvin, go on, me." And I said, "I'd never met you before." And they'd just done Fantasia on Glory to His Name.
Okay, yeah.
And in the
Which is
end,
really, it isn't my music really.
no, it's a Fantasia of 7 and 8. But I said, it was the first time I'd met you. I said, "You know what? I've been waiting a long time." And that piece of music just took my breath away. Will you stop keep taking my breath away, Dudley, with all this wonderful music? But
Yeah,
it's a wonderful thing to hear. And
yeah.
I remember I was at Butlins. I mean, we go into different pieces, and the piece of music of yours that I can never pronounce properly, Paean.
Ian.
Pian.
Yeah, Ian.
Apparently, it was written after you'd had some surgery as a thank you.
Yeah.
If that's correct. If it's not,
I had quadruple bypass.
that's heavy. That's not
Yeah.
something you have every day.
Yeah, yeah.
So was it kind of in the works? Because obviously you knew you had to have the surgery. So you had the surgery. We're thankful it went well, and PA came out. Now, was that kind of developing in your mind before the surgery? Or
Oh no, not at all. Actually, it was a request from there's a very strong Christian band movement in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Non-Salvation Army. Well, I think it includes the Salvation Army, but there's a lot of religious bands there.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of political bands. Even a lot of Swiss villages. They have the equivalent of the Conservative band and the Labour Party band, and they also have the church band.
Yeah.
But they were having some kind of anniversary, and they contacted me and said, "Could you write us a piece?" And actually, it was premiered on exactly the same night as it was played at the Albert Hall by the ISB. So it premiered in two places at the same time. But looking around for something to write, that's what I thought. I need to write something that's acknowledging what's just happened to me, and I'm very lucky man.
We thank God for it. I knew that I'd been told that you'd been ill. Obviously, not the details, but when you get asked to write music, and I think I've asked this of every composer and arranger, regardless of what the tune is, how do you put your own sort of perspective on making the tune original, bearing in mind that there's an RSA, Ken Downey, Jim Kerno, Bill Himes? How do you make the Dudley Bright version different? I mean, you obviously got your own character, but if you're using a very famous, I don't know, like St. Denio, how do you try and keep it separate?
Yeah, I think it's more that I'm not very good at copying. So even
though we were exposed to radios and music, and you get the earworm with that advert, and you find hang on a minute.
Yeah, even if I intended to write something that sounded like it was by Stephen Allen, it wouldn't sound. It would just sound like me.
Yeah.
I think Stephen Pearson, who when he heard that Fantasia on Glory to His Name, said he said, "Oh yes," he said, "I can hear that. Still can hear your finger marks." So I think often they come from inadequacy. You hear something repeated that you're not very good at, so that's your sound really.
Are there genres of army music that you don't find particularly easy to write? And sort of a trombone solo request comes through, yes, I can do that, but
No, not at all. That was Life's Command, which I recorded with the ISB. That was very hard to write. I'd never written anything for the trombone, and I think when you know a lot about it, it inhibits you, because you think, that would be too hard to play, rather than just hearing the sound of the instrument. My daughter plays the flute, and I just hear a flute, and I think, sounds good on a flute, and I want to write it. I don't know whether that might be difficult fingering. My granddaughter tells me, Papa, that's really awkward fingering. She plays the saxophone. But the trombone, it inhibits the creative process. So that was quite a long time in coming, actually.
Yeah. Obviously, you started out with the pen and paper. Is that still the case now? That if you have an idea, or if someone says, "I want a solo or an arrangement based on," you go look, if you know the tune, you go and look it up. is it kind of doodle it out before, or are you not a Sibelius finale user? I mean, do you do pen and paper and then get somebody else to put it on, or do you have the computer skills to say, right, hymn tune arrangements and Denio, Sibelius, here we go? How does the process begin for you?
I think there's a lot of questions all together in there. I'll see if I can remember them all. But how does a piece originate? I don't necessarily start with a tune.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, when we were talking about doing an Albert Hall piece, my first Albert Hall piece was back in. It was a piece called Confrontations. I don't know if that.
1982.
Okay. Was that when it was published, or when?
It's Tone Poem, published 423 in the festival series, 1982, according to the official list.
Yeah. Well, I wrote that piece when I was at college.
Yeah.
And we were actually, there was they started up a class. Someone thought there should be a class for brass band scoring, and they hired in Donald Osgood.
Wow. Now that's a name from the past.
Yeah. So
very neglected name.
Yeah, I'm quite old.
No. Donald Osgood has been around a long time. I never met him, but he's still a phenomenally good person and composer and arranger.
Yeah, and what a great subject. I mean, there's not a lot around by him, but it's all marvelous.
Yeah.
Right from, I love them all. A piece like Noel, in the green Christmas thing. Yep. I think the way that starts, it's just a trance series piece. It didn't sound like it. And quite adventurous for its time. And marches like Matondo. And he of course, he did the band arrangement of that everybody loves of French. Mm-hmm. That's a Don Osgood thing. So, and off the top of my head, I can't think of that. Anyway, he was he said to the class. I mean, most of them were just basically doing arrangements for a hymn tune into a brass quartet, and they had, most of my colleagues didn't have knowledge of the brass band, but I did some scoring for him. I think I did a Beethoven piano sonata into brass band. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Oh, I've had a request from the Yorkshire Imperial Metals Band that they're interested in trying anything that we're producing."
Oh, interesting.
And going back to what you were saying earlier about having your pieces tried out,
yeah,
I thought, wow, it's very rare that I ever hear anything of mine done. I'm just send it up in hope that it's going to get played.
Yeah.
I'm going to write them a piece. I'm going to write them a completely original piece, and send it to them. And well, as I used to, I didn't get very far with that. I wrote about 30 bars and never sent it to them. And then I was looking at it and I thought, I'll try and do something with this. And I picked it up and I realized, that's right, I finished it. And we used to have a brass band at Guildhall where I studied, but it had trumpets and French horns. It wasn't a proper brass band. Mm-hmm. But I finished the piece and showed it to Dennis Wick, who was the, you're a drummer. But most brass players see his name on the side of their mouthpiece. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, he was my teacher.
Take your word, but I'm afraid the name means nothing to me. But
well, there we are. Yeah, it doesn't matter how much you look at the side of your drum, you won't see his name.
Yeah,
but just okay.
On my drum, it just says Woodbridge Core number 435.
Okay, yeah, you've seen people using gold mouthpieces.
Yes, yes.
Well, most of the gold mouthpieces are Dennis Wick mouthpieces.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And they often post pictures of his different euphoniums, and they've all got different makes and people on it. So
yeah,
you can get a mouthpiece in the cornet that's of superior quality. I know that much.
Yeah, he's.
I played the cornet. I broke the valve, and the bandmaster said, "Get on the drum."
So he took this piece of mine and he played it in a concert at Guildhall, and that was lying around for a little while through the years, and I picked it up and had a look, and I noticed that my main motive was exactly the same. Well, it's two things really. It's a bit like "This Is Your Life."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Da 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 da.
Anyone outside of the UK not watching this will have a clue what we're talking about.
Okay, but it's also the last few notes of Stanley Dittmer's beautiful song, "I'm in His Hands."
Yeah.
I'm in His hands. And there I had a piece in front of me that had that motive running all the way through it.
Mm-hmm.
There was no intention of putting that tune in there.
Yeah.
So that's what you were saying about, starting with a tune. I started with the music.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, can I do something with this? And I found two spots in that piece where I could just pause, put the tune in to start with. And the first time it comes is just the chorus. And then later on, a similar place, I could put the verse and chorus.
Mm-hmm.
And I put it together. I sent it up, and Ray Bowes said, "Oh, we'd like to do this at the Albert Hall this year."
Sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I said, "Jaw dropping,
Yeah.
when is it?" And he told me, like, "Oh, I'm in Sweden with the orchestra, so I couldn't be there."
And they don't have tape recorders in them days and mobile phones. Hang on, we'll just video it for you.
Well, it was recorded on an LP.
Yeah. I think I've got a copy.
You know what an LP? Vinyl, black thing,
Yes. I've got
So
one somewhere.
Yeah. I think it actually got recorded by about five LPs in those days.
Yeah.
And it's actually come up on a couple of CDs more recently.
Yeah.
But that was an example of really a piece being taken out of my hands in a way. And Raybo said, "Oh, we're not sure about the ending. Can you have a look at it? Maybe extend it." So I coming back to what you said earlier, this is a bit of help, and I added 32 bars to the ending.
Okay.
So that is, and I can hit slightly different style, probably a little bit more mature and facile for a better ending. He was right, but so that was, and I've never had the aim to write wipey band pieces, but
yeah, it's probably why I've never done. But yeah, it's very interesting to hear the differences in experience and sort of your daily walk as a professional musician with these orchestras and with these outside ensembles and bands and brass people who want to say, "Hey, Dudley, can you write something for us?" And you've suddenly got to sort of go off on a skew from what you may be doing and do something different. When you accepted the invitation, I looked at the music. I said, "Look," I said to Dean, I think right from day one, "There's going to be composers that I have a piece of music that I absolutely adore. I want to know the whole DNA behind it." And for me, there's actually two pieces of Dudley Bright music that hit me every time. One is Fan for Him and Thanksgiving, which I think for some reason gets overlooked because it's a lovely little suite of music. But how did that come about?
I'm just trying to remember which one it is. Yes. Yeah, okay.
I could play it if I had my player out.
Yeah, that was written for a band in another band in Switzerland. I was going for. We've just had Ascension Day, and it's something that's not celebrated in this country. But in a lot of Europe, Ascension Day is big news.
Yeah.
And they have a big army, almost like a congress. And I was asked to go over there, and I said, "Well, actually, they didn't ask. I said I'd write a piece for the band." And again, I just use things that are lying around.
Okay.
again, think that this theme of Thanksgiving really, the opening, the fanfare was actually.
I'm getting awful feedback here. I'm not quite sure why.
I've got little speakers. Shall I use headphones?
Let me just.
Is that any better?
Ooh, a lot of static.
Static.
Yeah, as if a badly. Oh, it's cleared up now. It may have been something my computer may have been doing.
Any better?
Oh, much better. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think my computer was trying to tell me something, so I've just closed off the warning. I apologise, sir. You were saying about the overseas band, and you were writing.
Yeah. Okay. So the fanfare. I don't know if you know. I'm terrible with names. He was at the time bandmaster at Kettering.
That could be a lot of people.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of bandmasters. I mean, Richard Phillips. I think was at Kettering.
No, this. Anyway, he was getting married, and he was getting married to one of my former pupils at Boscombe, and I found myself writing some music for the wedding, and I always think that weddings, you know, when you have the procession, someone says, "Oh, we'll have this music," but most army halls, the aisle is quite short, and the music goes on ages after the. And I thought, well, you've got quite a big hall there. It'd be nice to have a piece that actually lasted exactly from when the bride comes in and to the front, and it's still quite. That's the fanfare, and I should be able to remember the name because the fanfare comes from the name, because it's Roy and Lorraine.
I love it.
Yeah, and someone said to me, "Oh, we're doing your piece fanfare, him and Thanksgiving," and Roy says it was written for his wedding. It wasn't, was it? And I said, "Oh, yes, it was."
Yeah, I found it on I think a Swiss CD, and as a set of kind of just 3 little tunes knitted together, it's so effective and simple and straight. I mean, it may not have been designed to be that, but it's kind of really joined up and it flows really well. But it's an absolute pleasure to listen to, because it's not, you know, you don't have to listen for 25 minutes like a Beethoven sonata. It's quick and snappy and to the point. Yeah. And I think as a composer, you don't want to bore people to death, but if a piece of music...
No, I have a go.
Oh, jokes. Now,
I think that look, there's plenty of people that write stuff that's great to listen to, doesn't stay around for too long, and you can go away whistling it. I don't really need to do that again as well.
What is there any piece of music that you've written that sort of comes back to haunt you because it's the most popularly recognised Dudley Bright piece?
You must be talking about Excelsior.
The second elephant in the room.
Yeah.
My favourite piece of Dudley Bright music, I'm afraid, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, well, it's just it's a selection. It's an overture. It's exactly what it was meant to be. In 1990, we had the British Congress.
Yes, I remember it. Yeah.
And
I didn't understand much of it, but I was only about 13.
Yeah, okay. A friend of mine was looking after the Youth Spectacular, which was going to be at Wembley Empire Pool.
Okay, yeah.
He was producing Ray Begley. He was producing that, and he said, "Can you help me?" He said, "I've been let down." But he said, "Can you help me with the music?" And I thought, "Wow, staff band, whatever. I'll do it." And he turned around and he said, "What I want is kind of West End show type band."
Really?
Yeah. And I'm like, "Oh, I don't do that sort of thing."
But I mean, I know Ray Begley's a trained dancer and has danced on stage professionally.
Yeah.
For a
show. Yeah.
For a Salvation Army sort of music event in an international congress to do a West End, you wouldn't have thought those two things would have gone together.
No, well, if there's a video knocking around, if you have a look at it, you'll see it was a great evening,
Yeah.
fantastic. And he came up with a list of demands, one of which was to write a theme tune for the evening.
Yeah.
And another thing was to link in between Glory to His Name. Someone was going to sing Glory to His Name, and then the Scottish Youth Band was going to play Goldcrest. And he said, I've got 32 bars of dancing in between. He said, I couldn't wait around. I need music for that. So there were 32 bars of that. There was...
we're talking we're not talking the songbook version of Go To It. We're talking the Ray Steadman Allen version of Glory, which is completely different. Because whenever we sing Glory to His Name in Sunday, hang on a minute, that's the wrong one. Because I'm thinking Glory to It, which is obviously I think Rosemary said it was his tribute to those blue, smoky 60s Soho bar bands where the inspiration for that song came. So to find that in a youth piece, that's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, that was being used that evening. So then Ray said, "Oh, I need an overture. Can you do an overture by the we called it the big band. There were no saxophones, but we couldn't get any saxophones. But we had trumpets, trombones, keyboards, bass, percussion, and so I just grabbed the tunes that were being used during the evening and put them together in an overture."
Yeah.
And that was the overture of that. It did start actually with a kind of how shall I say?
A very low key start, hasn't it?
Well, it originally started with a sort of Star Trek thing.
Oh,
but, yes. But anyway, Robert Redhead heard it and said to me, "I wonder, can you do a brass band version? And we'd like to play it. The ISB would like to play it at the Centenary, ISB Centenary, which I think was the next year, 1991.
Yeah.
And that was its first brass band performance. Yeah. But it wasn't intended to be a great piece or anything. But I think it's probably been recorded on more albums. So it's not an embarrassment because people like it. Probably an embarrassing thing was turning up at the bandstand in Boscombe in Bournemouth when the Household Troops band were there, and John Mott turned around and saw me and said, "Oh, we're just going to play your piece. Will you come and conduct?" And I was on holiday and I had a t-shirt and shorts on.
Oh yes, classic.
So that was the embarrassing part. But
be on holiday. I mean, he didn't know you were going to be there.
So no,
enjoy the holiday.
Yeah, it didn't spoil it because they played it very well actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The bit I've got to, because I remember asking you on Facebook that I listened to this countless times, and I think it's the penultimate section just before we'll keep the is I think the theme World Army Youth, if my memory serves me correct.
That's the one I just mentioned. That I was asked to write the theme tune for the evening.
Yeah.
So that was and there's another version on the evening. There was a big Fist Division ending, which isn't in the overture of that tune. With I think there were something like 1,500 singing company members. There was the Scottish Youth Band and a French Youth Band, and I don't know, some Melbourne Box Hill songsters or something, and they all sang it all at the end. On all the whole cast, so there were mass timbrels and.
I have to find a recording of this. I didn't know there was a vocal version.
Yeah. Oh yes.
Who wrote the word? I mean, I know you wrote the tune. Can you remember who wrote the words for it? Because I do remember Julian actually produced a copy of the words, but because I said to him, "Can you ask the professor where the words came from?" Because obviously they had to have singing, and I knew there was a mass thing.
No, I'm not a professor, by the way.
I thought you were.
No. I hold a position of professor of trombone at the Royal Academy of Music, but that doesn't entitle me to the title of being professor.
Ah,
you have to be specially particularly elected by the university to be a professor
An honouring
and,
professor for us.
and to give an inaugural lecture.
Ooh,
So
something you could do in your sleep.
I don't have those sort of things. But yeah, the words were by a dear friend at Ilford. Well, I asked him, because I knew he wrote poetry, and I asked him to write some words. He wrote me 4 different choruses, and actually I just put them together and used them as verses, and one of them as the chorus. But the music department didn't like the words and got someone else to rewrite them. They got them to rewrite them by Malcolm Bale, rewrote the words.
Oh, interesting. Another great name.
But it's never been published as a song.
No, I was surprised at that, because you've got very little in the vocal that I could trace in the vocal thing. So are you more comfortable in the orchestral band field, or is it just simply that's what you've written or been asked to write?
Yeah, I mean, lots of people write songs very beautifully. There's no need, not that a lot of people don't write very beautiful brass band music, but it's what I know. I think one of my exceptions to that rule is we soldiered at a corps down the road from where I live now, Leytonstone.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And someone came up to me and said, it's the centenary of the Home League. And there's a and the Home League began at Leytonstone.
Mm-hmm.
And they said there's a competition for a song, a Home League song, and we're going to win it. And Mrs. Sylvester's going to write the words, and you're going to write the tune.
Oh God, that's almost a crib of Norman Beercroft Temple 85, isn't it?
So she wrote the words, I wrote the tune, and it won. I think the prize was £5.
£2.50 each and a bag of chips on the way home.
Yeah, I think I probably gave it to Mrs. Sylvester, but and that was published. And there's another one, which I rather like, almost very rhythmic song called "Christ Is Born." It's a Christmas song, but that's it really.
Paul Gerhardt translation of, because I tried to find the English lyrics and I couldn't.
It's in the songbook.
Yeah, because I found it on your, and there was like one vocal entry. I thought, oh well, he doesn't do vocal then. But looking at your pieces, you almost, I mean, obviously you can write almost anything under the sun, and if you're called upon, you know, it's a good challenge to. But I remember the lovely little prelude in Good Company. It's almost kind of that medieval Tudor thing in that. Well, you know, how did In Good Company come about, if you can remember?
No, absolutely. Well, I was for a few years bandmaster at Ilford.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When I moved to the London Symphony Orchestra, I had more time on my hands because it was basically a shared job, and I was actually around at the Army more. Before that, I sometimes go months. I'd be away on tour or working, but I had a little bit more time, and so I was going to be at the Corps, and they needed a bandmaster, so I took on the band for 4 years, and we had a weekend away, and we planned the weekend, and I wanted to do the famous Henry V Pastime and Good Company.
Yeah.
But the cornet players complained. They said it was too much of a blow. So I thought, well, if I can mix this in with something else, and we had a theme tune for the weekend. I can't remember what it's called. Da, 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 da. Something like that. One of those.
Yeah.
So I thought I would mix them together, and it seemed a good piece to start the second half after the interval, and to begin with, as people were milling around, the cornets and solo cornets and trombones would stand at the back of the hall and play this Renaissance sort of dance, the Henry V, Pastime of Good Company.
Yeah.
And then when people began to wonder what was going on, the rest of the band would come in with this gospel song.
Yeah.
And they were on the platform, and that the change of key is about as far as you can get. It goes from an augmented fourth, diminished fifth. So it's a big, and it's like they're poles apart. And towards the end, they get actually begin to agree and play in the same key. So you get one a phrase of one tune and then a phrase of the other in between.
Yeah, Lord, I lift you on high, I think, isn't it? Da, 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 dun, dun.
Yeah.
I listened to a whole load of it earlier on deliberately, and it all kind of melded into one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I looking at your list. One thing you don't is a solo writer. I mean, obviously you've done. You say you the trombone solo that you caused yourself grief for, but selections, marches, hymn tune arrangements, like To Serve and to Save, Are You Joyful, Strike for Victory, a lot of, sort of tunes for openers and selections and stuff, but are there a load of sort of solos for instrumentational solos lying in the cupboard that haven't been published yet?
Unfortunately not. Strike for Victory is a double quartet, so that's a solo piece. That's four cornets, solo cornets and 4 trombones.
Based on an old chorus, I don't think we've got any more. So Strike for Victory, which is a lovely one.
Yeah, that was written for the Regent Hall, actually, for a big occasion there, and for a reunion. So the cornets and trombones came from the past, as it were, and so we had cornets and trombones strung out the back of the platform and cornets and trombones in the band. But it was very much an occasion piece. I was quite surprised when they published it. I don't think anyone's ever played it from the published. It was quite popular in America. Bill Himes took it up. Yeah, they that annual Canadian and Chicago staff band, they do an annual festival somewhere.
Yes, I've got a double CD.
So solos, no, I mean there's my own solo, the trombone solos, the trombone duet, When Jesus.
Yeah, I managed to find a copy of that at last, so that seemed to disappear for a while.
Okay, well, it's not published, but that was written. I was asked to write that for the Albert Hall for the year 2000.
Okay.
And play it with a young lad called Chris Gomersall.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. It's also been re-recorded with Enfield with Andrew Justice and names again. I'm forgetting. I can grab the CD.
Well, they know who they are, and that's the important.
Yeah. So, but I wrote a concertino for my brother to play. Years ago. I think he was still at school. He's a lot younger than me, and I decided to write a little concertino for him to play with his school band. And I think he's played the middle movement quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He seems to enjoy that. But if I think about it, I could probably mention a few soloists that have said, "Will you write me a piece?" But I've never got round to it.
Oh dear. Well, they'll be flooded in. I want a trombone. But I do remember Julian put a lovely video online. I think it was for his daughter's birthday, where you knocked out this march based on Bethany in about 24 hours, and there was a whole group of them in the kitchen. So speed isn't unimportant. You have the ability to do a very effective piece very quickly, I would guess. It's not something that's difficult.
Well, I know the piece you're talking about, and I wouldn't let that be published. It would probably take me, a few months to knock it into shape. And that's not the sort of. It takes a while to come up with decent ideas.
Yeah.
So if it's not ever going to be played again, then you can be freer. You can if somebody doesn't like it, then fine. It's only a special occasion.
Yeah, you can sort of reuse it in another piece, or the
Yeah.
ideas can be generated, and it gives you an embryo for another thing. But is it something? I mean, some composers. I mean, you get actresses and actors who say that in order to learn, they have to lock themselves away and cut themselves off from the world to be able to concentrate on the part and get the mood and understand it. When you're writing pieces, what's the process for clearing the palette and saying, I've got to write a selection, or I've been asked to write this Albert Hall piece or whatever? Where do you have to sort of go in a lot of room, or are you happy to sit in the living room with the computer or a bit of pen and paper? What's the process for you?
I think it's probably different for every piece. As I've said, quite a few of my pieces have come from something else, and there's been bits and pieces lying around. But I think in my process, often it's trying to. I often get the tempo. If I can get the tempo of the piece, and the kind of smell of it, and then I might sort of rough down on many. Yeah, still, oh, it's here. There was a manuscript book here this morning, but just scribble down. I'm not very good at remembering things. I have an idea, and I'm not very good at remembering. And just a single line with some counterpoint against it often goes a long way. And it's just a question of refining it and finding out what that's meant to me.
Got a smartphone full of voice memos then?
I tried that once, and it was horrendous. I think I've changed over the years, and I've actually tried to get better at doing it. And I would like to get to the point where I could actually hear what I want in my head, and then go and find out what it is.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things hanging around there at the moment that I actually haven't found out what the notes are, but I know what I want to write.
Yeah.
something stimulates you. There's something that you would like to hear but doesn't exist.
Interesting. Yeah, I just wonder, because you can have you're going along and walking the dogs, and something comes in and you have to write it down, or you'll forget it, or you've got to lock yourself away because there's so many distractions in the modern world that you want to focus on. You've got to write this piece, you want to focus on it. It's kind of okay. I mean, there are recordings of composers say the family were tooting away on their tricorders and practicing their cornets, and I had to write this march or this selection for the band for the anniversary, and I had to sit down and physically write it out. So the process depends on what the piece is for you.
Oh yeah, no two are the same. I can think of times when and the music for that congress that I was telling you about, that Youth Spectacular, it was horrendous because I didn't have much time and it was unfamiliar to me. And I had a tour of Spain with the orchestra that I was in, the Philharmonia Orchestra in those days. And I think I probably slept about an hour a night.
Yeah.
I was just desperately trying to get it together. And when I came home, I was trying to put it together, and I don't have a good enough ear to be confident without smashing things out on the piano. I'm not a pianist either. And my wife pushed a card under the door, and she said, if it wasn't for the last minute, you'd never get anything done. Sometimes I think a recurring theme is the pressure. If I need to do something, if I've got all the time in the world, I just can't get it to come through. And of course, being a professional musician, day in, day out, you're playing the best music there is.
Yeah.
Which is
and
without
also doing extremely high quality as well, aren't you?
You don't get the London Symphony Orchestra to play your piece, although it would be nice to do that. So that as soon as you try and think of something of your own, you realise it's woefully inadequate. So you have to kind of distance yourself from that music.
Okay. The most unusual place you've had a message come through of a piece of your music being played? I mean, I think South Korea, Romania, the middle of Zimbabwe at the moment ranks. So where's the most unusual place you've had an email or a text message or a postcard saying, we played your music in Botswana or whatever?
Well, I never have any. So I can't say
Really?
an unusual place. No.
You've never had an email from someone saying, we played a Simon in our Jubilee band, and it was fantastic.
No.
I don't, really? I'm astonished. Given the brilliance of your music, Dudley, that no one in the world has ever... You realise you're now going to be inundated with... I meant to tell you this last week. We played a Simon. We played Excelsior.
I did. I'm just remembering about a couple of years ago, I think it was. I was on tour in America with the Philharmonia Orchestra, and did come across. I don't know if it was even a message to me. I came across notice of a band in America playing one of my pieces, and I went straight to Google Maps and found that it was actually about 30 miles away from where I was actually at that time. I did send them a message. Say, do you realise I'm just more or less up for the Americans? That's just up the road, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
I can't remember what happened to that, but mostly I'm. Yeah, I don't like to criticise anybody, but I was involved in a special evening when Staines Corps first opened. They put together a sort of hand-picked band to do an evening festival, and I was asked to conduct and put the program together. And in the course of the program, we played Fanfare for Hymn and Thanksgiving. I found out later that very weekend the staff band were recording Fanfare Hymn and Thanksgiving.
Well, it's a good piece.
But nobody mentioned it.
Yeah.
No one came out and says, "Oh, we've just recorded this." It's really strange.
I've had email. I've had people that I've spoken to, and I will give them dignity. And he said, "You know what?" I said, "I've read that for the core band. I don't know how the music department got hold of it. I didn't know it got published, and so I saw it in the journal the next year." So hang on, where did that? No one ever bothered to tell me. So I don't think you're alone in that.
No.
So
well, I know that
they want to record your music, and it's not a case of not another Dudley Bright symphony, but it's kind of, hey, we've got another Dudley Bright piece, and this is going to be good. He knows how to write because you've got the professionalism and the technique to do it.
Yes. I'm thinking that in good company there. When the staff band visited America in 1957, Eric Leidzine mentioned they played some of his pieces, and I think at least one of them he said he'd never heard before, and they'd been written in the 1930s.
Yeah.
So I think the thing is these days that the availability of recordings, even videos, it's so much more than it ever used to be, and I don't think composers particularly did ever hear their music. And then they perhaps wish they had.
Like Barry Gott said, he said I was in Pasadena, and the band in Botswana or something said we played Lightwalk. He said, a Botswana band playing Lightwalk? I said, I can imagine the international staff band or the German staff band player. Some of these pieces are not something you twiddle together with 3 cornet players and a trombone player, and yet they're willing to have an attack at this and go because they really want to play this music. So, we really want to give it justice. So, what's in? Go on.
Well, I think it's interesting that I've always felt that my music is awkward rather than difficult, and it's not really available to a lot of average bands to play because it's awkward, and some of the key shifts and things like that. And I don't go out my way to make it easy. It's just like, well,
But that's
So
what you're writing. So
a lot of the time it's a struggle to get it down. So I'm grateful for whatever comes out in the end.
yeah,
But and I've always admired that our great the big names in the army that can write pieces that actually sound okay played by appalling bands. And if I had an ambition, it would be to maybe write something that sounded okay. You could tell it was a decent piece, even if it was played very poorly.
I think it's a case of you get these pieces and say, you know what, it's a bit beyond us, but we want to have a crack at it because we want to prove to ourselves that, I remember seeing the music for Silent on the Sand, saying, thank goodness we're not playing that because I think I'd have a double headache just trying to understand the notation. But you listen to it, it's a cracking march and it's really got speed and pace to it. And I think that's what, certainly, I mean, you say about being awkward and stuff, but I look at some of your pieces, they're functional, Near the Cross, Abundant Joy, which I haven't mentioned, a wonderful little medley of different tunes, but it serves the purpose. And
Yes, the purpose of that was, it's quite a long time ago. I remember going to a band weekend.
It was published, but I think Hendon Baden recorded it in the mid-70s, which is why I've got...
Yes. Yeah, but I went to a band away weekend and listened to the band on the Sunday afternoon and thought the music was totally inappropriate for families and young children. And I thought, well, okay, they're playing the stuff that people expect. It was one of our top bands, and you're thinking, well, they're playing the stuff that people they don't want to go along and hear Enfield or ISB playing little ditties, that will please a 4-year-old. They want to hear something with a bit of guts to it. So fair enough. But I thought, well, why can't we combine the two? Something that's actually going to be a little bit of something that's going to take a bit of work, a bit of playing, that aficionados are going to appreciate the playing, but actually it's got tunes in it that small children might know. Well, probably small children at the time.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of things like Blythe Heritage and Splendor of Youth.
Yeah, well, this was before that.
Yeah.
Oh, Splendor of Youth. No, that was Phil Catlin, wasn't it?
No, Splendor of Youth, Condon.
Oh, right. Okay. I'm thinking there's another youth something or other.
Yeah.
But I think Blythe Heritage was later.
About.
Yeah, but that was where that came from. Also, something that my kids would enjoy.
Yeah. So, bearing in mind that we're in this, the reason why this project is going is because of lockdown, and we can't get out and practice with the orchestra and band. How has it allowed the compositional pen to come out with some pieces that have been pestering you for the while, or have you been kind of forcing yourself to relax and go, do you know what, I can chill, I can,
If you look around my house, there's so much that needs doing that I haven't even written anything. I've done some doodling. I do try and train myself. I do exercises and things with pencil and paper, but I don't at the moment have. Oh, there's quite a few pieces that are waiting to be done, and I don't know if you realise about Pursuing Horizons, which was done at the ISB.
I've heard it. It's a lovely.
Yeah.
Another epic, I think, isn't it?
Sorry.
Another epic, I think, Pursuing Horizons.
Well, it was written for this secular use for orchestral brass, to be played on a course by the the London Symphony Orchestra Brass Academy. Steve Cobb heard that and he said, well, will you arrange it for band? And actually tried not to do it. But he said, no, I think it's, I said, be it on your head. If it doesn't work, don't
be honest.
Don't say I didn't tell you so. But he was right. I think it worked. It was done by the massed staff bands as well. But that had started off as another piece. So I've got 3 more of those. I did one every 4 years for the London Symphony brass academy.
Yeah.
So they're waiting to be done, to be turned into a band thing. And they're not just a straight arrangement. They're kind of recomposed in a way.
Yeah. So you're sort of taking notes and stuff you've done before and reimagining them, or it comes back. You couldn't find a place for that piece of music, and then it comes back. Yeah, that will fit. That will work, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, you don't. If I write something for a brass ensemble, and these were large brass ensembles, actually, the Pursuing Horizons, there were actually 40 different parts.
Wow.
Yeah, originally. There were 3 groups of brass ensemble, and the thing is, you don't have to worry about people getting tired, because you can.
They haven't got the chance to, because you're being so awkward.
No, there's plenty of players, so it goes from one group. If you imagine 3 bands,
yeah.
And so one band can play one bit, and another band can play another bit. So then they get to rest. So it's not hard work. But the others were written for basically 2 orchestral brass sections.
Mm-hmm.
The sort of size that would be 3 or 4 trumpets, 3 or 4 trombones, and 4 horns and a tuba, just spaced in a V, playing against each other. Mm-hmm. But the instruments are different, the sounds are different. So when it goes from one medium, you wouldn't write it like that for a brass band. Yeah. There's a lot more kind of runs and finger twiddling, and less stentorian chords and fanfare-y stuff. Mm. So you have to try and reimagine it.
Okay. Outside, I mean, you're busy with the orchestras and with Regent Hall and with the teaching and the mentoring. Outside of your music, what do you enjoy doing? I mean, I know you love your trombone playing, but if you have to put music aside and go out for a walk and you see something, reading, what other passions are there in the Bright life?
None really. Is that boring?
I don't. No reading, no watching TV, loving the old cinemas.
Watch TV with my wife, and we've been married many years, and we have our way of living, which is surviving this lockdown. She's counted as a vulnerable person, so we've been staying inside. I do what's necessary, DIY stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
I love my wife's great at the garden, and I love my garden. Love her garden, I should say. and the weather we've been having, it's just been wonderful. I just sit there, take an interest in what's going on. I think there's too much in music to give any time to do anything else. Yeah. There's so much great music I've never heard, and to get a chance to hear it for the first time.
Yeah. So I mean, I know you worship with the Regent Hall band, with the comrades there in Regent Hall, but if the lockdown ended tomorrow and you were back to what you should have been doing on Monday morning, what would that involve in a professional capacity?
Well, look, this is a really, I don't have the answer to that. I know no one has the answer to that, because as with all performing situations, nobody knows, and it could be. Let's hope it springs back. Yeah. But at this point in time, I mean, I'm officially retired, so.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So my when I retired from the London Symphony Orchestra, or I think they kicked me out, I've actually been busy in a freelance capacity, because that's how things have gone.
I knew you were professionally involved with the orchestra, but I didn't know whether the retirement had come in yet or not.
Yeah. I mean, so from the actual position, the actual seat, as it were, in the London Symphony Orchestra, I retired 2 years ago.
Okay.
In fact, almost exactly 2 years ago. But I've been back and played with them, play with most of the orchestras. I was due to, at the beginning of the lockdown, I was just on the verge of going up to play with the Northern Symphony Orchestra, and to sit next to Richard Martin, which I was looking forward to enormously. And that was the first time I would have played with them, but that was cancelled.
Yeah.
But it's a dreadful situation, and it's a lot worse for a lot of people than for me. So if I have to just stay at home, then I'll stay at home. I'm still doing my teaching. I'm doing teaching online. As I was saying, I'm a professor, not professor, a professor of trombone at the Royal Academy of Music, and it's interesting to consider how you can do things online.
Yeah.
And I've got some projects going on, not really composition projects, but I'm learning quickly about computer audio and video and stuff.
Let's join the club.
Yeah, aren't we all? So yeah, my time's busy.
I'm glad to hear it. It's really that you're not letting it get to you and you're keeping active. I think that's really important. Do you have a favourite Salvation Army song at the moment that keeps coming back to you? Or is there one that has always been there?
That's difficult. I'd never thought about that. I think there's some that always.
The amount of times I get "My life must be Christ's broken bread" quoted back at me is
yeah. I mean, I love the tunes rather than. And if I love the tunes, then I love the words.
Mm-hmm.
The Denmark Hill is one of my favourites.
Mm-hmm.
And Brantwood, I love thee who thou art.
Yeah.
Particularly, I go back to the Norman Bearcroft arrangement of male voices with that has a
Calvary track, I think.
The Calvary track. I think that's really special. I love that.
That reminds me of an unpublished piece that the ISB recorded, and I was surprised that it wasn't, and it's your Salvation Waltz, because that's in places very Bearcrofty, but yet that's never published. Yeah, I thought that it's almost like him taking some of the wonderful old tunes and put them in it's got that kind of sense of humour to it. I mean, I think the CD says it's more Ravel than Debussy or whatever, but how did Salvation Waltz come about for those of us lucky enough to have the CD with the recording on it?
Yeah, well, that was a request from the New York Staff Band.
Ew, weird.
Assignment was a request from the New York Staff Band about the same time as Peter Graham wrote Ambassadors.
Okay, yeah.
And I wrote Assignment, and that's the kind of energy in that was I was trying to pick up on that very American, New Yorkian sense. And they also played Confrontations quite a bit around that time.
Okay.
Assignment was Take Jesus to All the World. They'd got a world tour. Right. So I think that was where that came from. And then I had a letter from them saying, would I write a piece? Would I write them a selection for something or other? And I've never written a selection in my life. And probably never will. I don't. Hang
on, in the strength of the King, abundant joy. They're all
none of them are selections.
I put a selection.
A selection being.
I'll take your word for it. You're the boss.
Yeah, a selection being a theme and a number of songs on that theme, one after another, medley or other. Yeah. So they asked me for a selection, and I didn't want to write a selection. Although, actually, you'd be surprised that there's some very fine pieces that are actually selections. I notice now the music department don't tell us what kind of piece that we're playing. They just give us the title. Have you noticed that?
I have noticed that. It's very hard when you want to catalogue it. Is it a festival arrangement? Is it a festival march? Is it a tone? What's the difference between a tone poem and a variations on a theme kind of thing?
Yeah, and of course, well, in some ways, all Salvation Army music is tone poems.
Yeah.
But we normally think of as a tone poem, for instance, as being some kind of epic piece, which is not necessarily true. And I think they're probably right, so that people don't categorize something that is not meant to be categorized in a way. A title is enough. But anyway, I thought, how can I write a selection that isn't what I think of as a selection?
You've got to find what comes, haven't you? I mean, if they've given you an idea, it's, well, this is what came out of the creative process.
Yeah. So, there's a piece by Ravel. You're right, called La Valse, which is the waltz, but it's not a waltz in the Viennese sense, in the Strauss's, Johann Strauss. It's an impression of and the idea that Ravel had this idea for La Valse, and the people swirling around and getting more and more hectic, and I thought about all these people who have been saved, and this great dance to celebrate their salvation, and I don't know if what they would be wearing, whether they'd be wearing Salvation Army uniform or not. And it's a slight take on I think James Kernow's The Great Salvation War.
Yes.
A great Salvation Waltz, a Salvation Waltz. I think that's probably where the title came from. I deliberately tried to make it sound more like La Valse. That was a bit of a pastiche, but it's hard to play light enough. It's the thing with the brass band is that most of the instruments are foreground instruments, and if you take an orchestral score, sometimes it's really surprising how much music is going on that you can't hear.
Really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and we, as brass people, we tend to hear what the brass are doing and the percussion are doing, and then you could pick up an orchestral score and be surprised what a lot of texture is going on in the strings and the wind, and you can't really do that with brass band because it's all foreground, it's all at the same level. And that, well, it takes a very sensitive group to be able to have people playing stuff that isn't really meant to be heard.
Oh, okay.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's
the juice, really. I mean, you just got to. I think Bill Holmes said, if it's not there, it ain't going to come. And if you've got the idea of someone said, "Can you have a crack at it?" He said, "Well, I'll give you what comes out. It may not necessarily be what you want, but I think half the time, if you ask a composer for a piece of it and say, 'Can you write me a march or a hymn tune?' and you've had something written, you're like, 'Thank you. You've been able to do something. We really thank you for taking the time and effort.'" I think your credentials are impeccable for yourself, sir. And I think that as a veteran Salvationist musician writer, your reputation is secure. And there's no doubt that you're up there.
That doesn't really matter, though, does it?
But I think it's a credit to you that these pieces that may come out of the back garden, that people will be saved and blessed, and we will be able to think. But have you got a favourite Bible verse or verses that you cherish and treasure, or is it just whatever you read next?
Well, I was asked to do a talk, online talk for a section fairly recently, and that's a whole different thing. But when I realised that I hadn't included a Bible reading, and I'd said, look, actually, I would include the whole Bible because this is what this is all about.
That's a lot.
It's like I know it's that what normal people say. It's like being asked to choose between your children. But I mean, if there's one go-to verse, not a verse, chapter is Philippians 4,
Okay.
4-9, and which has been at the back of my head for many years, like studying the Purcell anthem that starts, rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. That's always been there, but it's think on good things, whatsoever things are of good repute, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's special for me.
I'm really pleased to hear that, because it's really been nice to be able to hear the fun and the inspiration and the passion behind the music, and in a sense to try and learn the stories behind the compositions, the commissions and the pieces of music that have your name on it, and for people to go, Dudley Bright, oh, he's a trombonist, and I'm not quite sure about this, but we can play it, that people want to play your music and are interested in learning more about you. So I really want to thank you for just taking the time to walk through your compositional history, explain the techniques and the passions and the fun stories and the stories that move you as well. So we thank you very much for that. I'm going to pray with you. As always, feel free to join in, dance around the room, walk the dogs, entirely up to you. But dear Lord, yet again, a privilege to pray with such a wonderfully gifted man. I thank you for Dudley. I thank you for his family. I thank you that he has followed faithfully your skills that you have embedded in him, and that whether it's his professional life in the orchestras, working with the children, the youth, or the professional brass bands that are so famous in Great Britain and across Europe, that he is very much aware of the reality of his day-to-day talents and his limitations, but he doesn't allow that to be held back, Lord. And when he's serving you and when he's trying to write these pieces for you, that you are very much in the center of it, and that the truth of the words and the music are very much in his faith and following you. And we thank you for his faith in you, his wantingness and his willingness to follow you. We thank you for all those who have inspired him in the music and the concerts and the conversations that you've had with people from all genres and fields of music and of interests. We just thank you, Lord, for his life, his work, the people who've mentored him, and the people he comes into contact with that just feel blessed for having known Dudley, whether it's his pupils or his friends and neighbours, who that simple handshake, that smile will maybe hit something that none of us will know about. But I just want to thank you, Lord, for his compositional gifts that you've blessed him with, that he continues to use as effectively as he can, and that when he gets stuck and when he's doubting, he knows you are there to move him in the right direction. So I just want to leave him and his family in your hands now, Lord, that you'll strengthen them, give them that courage in the next few days and weeks to just get through this very mucky time, Lord, but knowing that you are there and that they can rely on you 100%. I simply say thank you for the life and work and the continued life and work of Dudley Bright, and the privilege is to be able to play, listen and to speak to him, and for me, Lord, to be able to call him as a friend. Amen.
Thank you.
Right, I will